Well, I'm up for election in November. I'd appreciate your vote.
Coming up, it's kickoff time for the Super Bowl of Alaska politics.
An individual says, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that is just full of it.
I hear people say it's time for a change.
I am not quoting myself.
How the presidential election might affect local races.
It's like watching the World Wrestling Federation on debate stage.
You were governor for 8 long years.
Sometimes stranger than fiction, why politics is Alaska's favorite sport.
Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers, with challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief the best is yet to come, bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
Welcome to Frontiers as we explore next Tuesday's political landscape. The presidential race could very well affect the balance of power in Alaska. If Hillary Clinton does well here, that could send more Democrats to Juneau. A number of factors makes this year's election different. There's the increase in early voters. In the first few days alone, there were more than twice as many compared to the last presidential race, as well as the number of competitive races, like in East Anchorage.
My name's Harry Crawford, and I'm running for the State House.
Crawford is a Democrat out to win back his old House seat when he held for 10 years.
We need a fair oil tax.
I think that there is a certain point where you run business out of your state.
The question, is Lance Pruitt's Republican seat safe?
Hey, Lance Pruitt. Hey.
Or will the trend we saw in the primary, in which 7 incumbents were ousted, carry over to the general?
3,900.
One Democrat feels the heat, Representative Harriet Drummond. Her opponent, Mike Gordon, carries a lot of weight in the business community. He used to own Chilkoot Charlie's. Their main beef, budget cuts.
We're at a stage where we need to make some hard choices, and I can do that.
If there's any cuts still to be made, it needs to be done surgically, not meat cleaver style.
Okay.
Perhaps the race where the stakes are highest, Senate Seat N, which spreads from East Anchorage to Girdwood. Vince Beltrami, a longtime union leader, has raised more than $200,000 to unseat Kathy Giessel, a leader in the Republican majority. Giessel has about the same amount of campaign cash to spend, but Beltrami believes he has the upper hand.
Everyone is really unhappy about the failure of the current crop, the majority leaders, to get the budget deficit under control.
We've actually accomplished in 4 years, 10 years of reductions.
No one knows for sure how voter distaste over Donald Trump's lewd behavior or Hillary Clinton's latest email probe will influence the final outcome.
This is the most consequential election that I have seen in my lifetime, and I think it's really important that everybody get out and vote.
From the number of blue stickers going out the door, it looks like this could be an election of a lifetime.
Thank you for voting. Have a good day.
Another race to keep your eye on, Senate District B in Fairbanks, which pits 2 well-known candidates, the incumbent, Senator John Coghill, a Republican, and Luke Hopkins, a Democrat, and the former mayor of the Fairbanks North Star Borough. Both candidates differ on how to deal with our state budget crisis.
This year is going to be a tough year. And for people to say that you can just talk your way through it is not wise.
It's not the issue of we have to do less. We have to do what's best for Alaska.
Hopkins worked closely with Governor Bill Walker when he was an attorney for the Gasline Port Authority. Up next, we'll have analysis on this race and others from Christopher Clark and Charles Wolforth here with their take on next Tuesday. Also a play about 2 giants of Alaska history.
I'm the reason there's an oil boom in Alaska. If it wasn't for me, it wouldn't happen yet.
Is that a joke?
an imaginary conversation between two men who disagreed about almost everything, but how their love for Alaska bridged the gap.
The Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium provides comprehensive health services for Alaska Native and American Indian people across our state. In addition to world-class care at the Alaska Native Medical Center, our work delivers health services for rural Alaska. From cutting-edge technology for the best care possible, to modern construction of clean water systems and health clinics, to health training and outreach that honors our culture, our vision is that Alaska Native people are the healthiest people in the world.
Vince Beltrami says he wants to represent you in Juneau, but he also wants to keep his $185,000 union boss job. Yes, really. That means the unions would pay him 3 times as much as he'd be paid to represent you. So, who do you think Vinny would look out for in Juneau?
This communication was paid for by the Accountability Project. Top 3 contributors are Republican State Leadership Committee, Alaska Frontier Constructors, and Advanced Supply Chain International. This notice to voters is required by Alaska law. I certify this ad is not authorized, paid for, or approved by the candidate.
You don't have to live in a big city to be a foster parent. You don't have to have a big house, a fancy car, or lots of money. What you need is a home. What you need is a heart that can open to a child who needs you. Won't you become a foster parent today? A child is waiting. Call 1-800-478-7307.
Football games never break out at the office. Hockey games either. Turns out covering sports in Alaska is not for the weak of heart or back. Reading highlights from sports feeds? Easy. Getting the words out at 45 below? Try it sometime. Dave Goldman goes the distance for every Alaska sports fan. Like him, KTVA 11 Sports and Dave Goldman. Be there.
Well, even though it was packed every night, the ticket had a very short run at a downtown Anchorage theater. So for those of you who didn't make it to Cyrano's, here's a taste of what you missed. The play is set in 1990. Wally Hickel contemplates a second term as governor and asks his old political rival, Jay Hammond, to join him on the ticket. Of course, this never really happened, but it is fun to think about. 2 men who occupied the governor's mansion are gone, but not forgotten by Alaskans. Jay Hammond.
When I talk to seemingly totally opposed parties, that they're not nearly as far apart as they might have you believe.
Wally Hickel.
Alaskans are truly independent, regardless of political party. We like to stand our ground.
Cut your own wood, clean your own fish, and fly your own plane.
You're the archetype of the greedy tycoon.
The actors who played these 2 men never knew them and don't look much like them either.
Everybody knows him. Everybody has a Jay and Wally story.
I'm told that I've sort of captured some of his persona.
I never lose. Losing is in the mind.
But Matt Miller's performance as Wally Hickel apparently won over his wife, Irma Lee, who saw the play not once, but twice.
Character Jay asks my character Wally, "Why are you running?" And I say, "My wife Irma Lee told me to run, and I always listen to her."
My wife Irma Lee told me to run, I always listen to her.
To which Irma Lee out loud replied, "You're darn right you do, and you should keep doing it."
What would it take to get you to run with me?
A lobotomy.
The play is mostly fiction, a conversation that sprang from Dick Reichman's research and imagination.
By creating a piece of theater, I've tried to move beyond history.
Our resources are stranded up here. How do we get them down to the temperate zone where people are?
Dick Reichman's hope to evoke a very different world than we have today.
They lived in an era when ideas were more important. One of the amazing things about our present election is it's all personality stuff. We barely have time to talk about ideas.
I stand up for the common man. I oppose moneyed interests like you.
Moneyed interests. I am the common man.
Yeah, you're a rich man.
I grew up poor and hungry. In 1942, I arrived in Seward, Alaska on a tramp steamer with exactly 37 cents in my pocket.
Even those who knew both men found the interplay of ideas here authentic.
I'm just really enjoying the play because I can just see that happening.
It brings forth
two individuals who in their heart had nothing more than the best interest of the citizens of Alaska.
It's the people's money.
All the more reason was to use it for creating jobs.
The reaction is just what Dick Reichman had hoped for.
There's a line in the play. Jay Hammond says, two kinds of people gravitate to Alaska. Those who see new ground to plow up.
The other sees wilderness to preserve. That's my type. And the other type, your type, you read Horatio Alger in the Wall Street Journal. Your picks and shovels bruise the toes of us environmentalists.
Yet despite those differences, there was common ground.
These men believed in our democracy. These people believed in the function of government. And they believed the only way that we as a society can progress is to come together under the forum of government.
He continued to be wrong about most things. But he meant well. He never gave up scheming for a better world.
Someday, Cyrano's hopes to bring the ticket back for an encore and take it on a tour of the state. Well, joining us now, two people who knew both men well. Charles Wolfrith and Christopher Clark, both veterans of watching politics in Alaska. So I'm going to start with you, Charles, because you actually helped Wally Hickel write his book, Crisis in the Commons. So did you think that this performance was authentic?
I thought that that Matt Miller did a really good job of capturing kind of the essence of Wally Hickel. I mean, there are plenty of details that I would have made different, and I was kind of struggling in my seat for the first few minutes. But sort of the core of what the man was like and what he was all about was definitely there on stage, yeah.
So what's the takeaway from this?
That dialogue was vigorous and still is. I think after he left office, Bill Egan would meet with Wally Hickel down at the Lucky Wishbone for the best fried chicken in the state, and they would have conversations like this because they cared. There was fire in the belly. They really cared about what was going on in the day, and I think we still see that, just maybe not so much. I think for the first 40 years of statehood, Alaskans were very much engaged with this novelty of being a state, being in control of our destination, and everything mattered. John Greeley, the former Associated Press reporter, once said that Alaska's favorite wintertime sport was obviously sled dog racing, but number two was politics.
Yeah, one of the things about the play, which is very different from today, is that there were two candidates who had two totally different visions of Alaska, and they fought it out, and everybody knew what each one stood for. And so when the voters chose, they chose two very different visions.
Well, one of the things we've seen in this past election, or this current one, is just the ugliness in the presidential race. How might the presidential race affect our legislative races?
Well, I think that it has potential to affect in a couple of ways. One is that the types of voters that Donald Trump attracts are in different amounts, demographically in different House and Senate races. So that can sort of change who turns out and how they vote. And the other is, of course, if the presidential race is determined early in the evening, that could depress Republican turnout in Alaska, assuming Hillary Clinton wins, or some, if there's a big, and that's happened in 1980 when,
right.
when Ronald Reagan crushed Jimmy Carter and Carter conceded early in the day. Democrats simply didn't vote, and we had a complete turnover of our legislature.
To underscore what Charles said, I think no better race will show this than the Senate District B race that you profiled with John Coghill, a conservative, who will likely get Trump supporters showing out strongly in North Pole, and Luke Hopkins, the Democrat, who likely will see a lot of Hillary supporters and anti-Trump voters in the College and Esther precincts. So that, I think, will be definitely a race that will be influenced by how the presidential turnout is and how people show up to vote in that particular race, especially.
Well, one of the things that we're hearing is that we could see a change in the Republican majority, that we might see a bipartisan coalition form for a couple of reasons. Maybe the presidential race, maybe the permanent fund dividend cut that some lawmakers supported, others didn't. What do you think?
Well, I mean, voters are very, very unhappy with the performance of the legislature last year. The approval ratings for the legislature are extremely low, and the legislature was run by Republican majorities, and already in the primary election, 7 of those incumbents were booted, who were majority members. So I would expect there's a strong probability that will continue. There's a few members who look particularly vulnerable. There could be some Democrats, but for the most part, it looks like Republicans are vulnerable. So that could give us a coalition government in the House. I think that's the most likely place for a change to happen. and that would mean that solutions that involve raising more revenue for our fiscal gap are much more likely to pass.
In the past, we've talked about how there's the power of the incumbency. And this time around, I think what we might be seeing is a referendum on the stigma of being an incumbent, the stigma of the incumbency. And as we saw in the House, that's where you're likelier to see a bipartisan coalition emerge. In order for a bipartisan coalition to emerge in the Senate, both Senator Coghill and Senator Giesel would have to lose, and that would just take the Republicans down from 13 to 11. So you still have to do some willing and dealing to put together a governing coalition or organization in the Senate. But I think you'd have to see those two lose before you see something more bipartisan, if you will, in the Senate side. And I agree with Charles, it's on the House side that we'll be watching key races too, here in Anchorage especially, involving Lance Pruitt versus Harry Crawford and Liz Vasquez versus Jason Grenn and Dustin Darden. Those.
How about Matt Clayman?
Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, well, that's I think there's potential vulnerability there. Marilyn Stewart's a very appealing candidate. I think Clayman has got, you know, everything behind him in terms of the fundraising and all that.
And history, because that's a district that Democrat Lindsey Holmes won, and more or less Ethan Berkowitz had that same district.
It's been a Democratic district, although Clayman came within about 100 votes of being defeated last time. So that's one that I'll be looking at to see that one of the few, I think, where a Democrat is really vulnerable.
And one of the things we have to look out for is the big surprise. Mm-hmm. We always miss a race, and this might be one that we're not paying attention to as we ought to be.
I think Sharice Millett and Patrick Higgins is another race that could be a surprise. She was the majority leader in the Republican House.
And she
majority.
wants the job as House Speaker.
She wants to be Speaker, and blame for what happened, could very well go to her and to Lance Pruitt. I mean, they were really in charge, and she's in a district which is pretty closely divided, Republican Democrat.
Well, let's turn to statewide races. Don Young, Steve Lindbeck. You think Steve Lindbeck has any chance of edging to the top here?
I don't. I think it's not for lack of not. He certainly has a command of the issues. He's certainly smart, but he got into the race too late, and his biggest struggle is name recognition. And with statewide races, it's axiomatic that you must start a year in advance for a good reason, especially if you're trying to take on an incumbent. You got to get your name out there, and I think Steve's been working hard on that. But it's hard to beat the name recognition of a Don Young.
It's difficult for any Democrat to win a statewide race. Look at Mark Begich and Dan Sullivan. You couldn't have been known much better than Mark Begich. Steve comes to it without having run for any office previously. And as I was told by a really smart older guy who was a politician for a long time, first people have to know who you are, and then you got to convince them why to fire the person who's already there. And that's a big thing to do from starting from zero.
Well, let's go to the Senate race.
Let me just say something good for Steve Lindbeck. And I think he's helped, again, provide us the vigorous discussion that we crave, at least us junkies crave, that we love to have. And having Steve Lindbeck in the race has helped foster that.
That's right, because
there's something to be said for that.
If they get a free ride, they don't have to answer our questions, do they?
Right.
Well, speaking of dialogues, let's take a look at the U.S. Senate race. We have Joe Miller back in the mix.
It's deja vu all over again. And we actually have 4 candidates in that race. Obviously, Republican Lisa Murkowski, Libertarian Joe Miller, Democrat Ray Metcalf, and non-affiliated Margaret Stock are the 4 top candidates. I'm sensing that Lisa Murkowski is likely going to win. In a recent public broadcasting debate, Joe Miller did a great job, but he did it mostly to appealing to his base when he talked about abortion and appointing anti-abortion judges to the U.S. Supreme Court. I don't see how that bought him more votes beyond his base. So I'm thinking that that's going to be a hard nut to crack. I think some people are assuming that by his being in the race, it splits the votes and it gives an opportunity to a Democrat, Ray Metcalf, or the non-affiliated candidate, Margaret Stock. But I think Senator Murkowski he's not taking this race for granted, as some may say she did in the primary of 2010, and that's making a difference.
Yeah.
So, out of all of the races, out of all the things that are going on, what are you most interested in learning about this when the dust settles?
Well, I think the most important question for Alaskans really is what legislature do we end up with? And do we end up with one that sort of says maybe oil prices will go up, we really cut the budget a little bit and just wait and see what happens, or one that says, okay, we need revenues, we need a fiscal plan, we need to solve it. And that's a pretty big decision for Alaska. It could really determine what our state looks like and our economy for many years to come. I think a lot of the other races, I agree that Lisa Murkowski, I think, will win. I think Don Young will win. I don't even think those races will bring out a lot of voters. Will Trump or Hillary win Alaska? It's kind of a parlor game in a way. We only have 3 electoral votes. I kind of think that Trump will win, though I think it'll be much, much closer than most presidential races. And I do think that how that plays out through our legislative districts will have an impact.
And I'm with Charles. Being the legislative junkie that I am, I'm more interested in the House and Senate races because as August was the first step toward a fiscal plan, so too is November. And the question is, on November 8th, will we even have resolution? Will it be like the Benny Nagiak and Dean Westlake race? Will we have another race out there where we're waiting for the votes to be tallied? And if so, that could make a difference about how soon a House or Senate organizes, because that one vote, one person can make that big difference.
Well, Chris, before we run out of time, we have a little surprise for Charles Wolford. We have some politics of the past that started out in high school.
Wow.
Chris, who are these people?
Go ahead, Charles.
You would not believe who's in this picture.
Well, first of all, start with the guy on the bottom.
That's me. Yeah. This was our crazy volleyball team that we had at Stellar High School, where we would dress up in suits and play against the teachers or whoever else. The person all the way on the left is Mark Begich. Right next to him, chairman of the Alaska Republican Party, Tuckerman Babcock. Carl Guess, who was his younger sister was Gretchen Guess, the state senator. His father was an important
House Speaker.
Lloyd Kurtz, who now is an investment guy down in San Francisco, and Eric Troyer, who's up in Fairbanks and is a great trail volunteer, and then Tom Begich, who's going to be a new state senator. So we had a pretty remarkable little high school class.
So now we know how you get your inside scoop on politics.
That's right. We call it the Stellar Mafia. We have tentacles everywhere.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Well, we move on. It was a first for Alaska. The northernmost U.S. Senate debate ever. Hear what candidates promised they would do for the Arctic.
I just want cremation.
Cremation specialists in Alaska.
Can I have a service before cremation?
Our staff is committed to serving your needs.
I just want something basic. The simpler, the better.
Specializing in simple cremations. Whatever your reasons are for choosing cremation, call Cremation Society of Alaska, 277-2777, or in the Valley, 373-8627, and on the web at alaskacremation.com.
Air travel for Frontiers is provided by Pen Air. When business or recreation takes you anywhere across the state, Pen Air is there. The only family-owned airline serving Alaska. Pen Air, the spirit of Alaska.
For a teen living on the streets, the world is a dark place. The Candlelight Vigil for youth experiencing homelessness shines light into the darkness. It shows that, despite the cold, Alaskans are embers of warmth. One candle provides light. A sea of candles is a beacon of hope. Help us fill Town Square on November 17th for the Candlelight Vigil.
Every day something's different, and I get really excited to report on stories in Alaska. I cover these stories. I need to be out there. I need to be experiencing all this stuff. I need to know. And Alaska is so big that you really have to get out there, because I think it's really important to meet people and cover their communities. There's just so many stories here that I could do a story for every day for the rest of my life and still have something new to tell in Alaska.
He writes killer novels.
I'm Rick Castle.
She catches killer suspects.
Mr. Castle has offered to assist with the investigation.
No way.
I know, isn't it great?
Castle, return to the scene of a crime.
Weekends on KTVA.
In a lot of debates for statewide races, there are only 1 or 2 questions about rural Alaska, but this one was different. It was the first U.S. Senate debate ever held above the Arctic Circle. Barrow, in a narrow vote, recently renamed itself Utqiagvik, the town's original name for itself, a place to gather roots. The roots of the culture run deep here too, so it only seemed proper that a debate on the Arctic come to the home of the whalers. The opening ceremonies included the Pledge of Allegiance in 2 languages.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
And a blessing in Inupiaq. A prayer of hope that the Arctic will get the attention people here feel it has long deserved.
This is an historic event.
From Russian military aggression to oil and gas development to infrastructure needs, the Arctic was front and center stage.
We are the gatekeepers to the western end of the Northwest Passage, and we have nothing up here to protect us.
One of the things we really need up here are some deep water ports.
Barrow, or Utqiagvik, doesn't have a port, yet the loss of summer sea ice has made it possible for cruise ships like the Crystal Serenity to navigate waters nearby. The warmer climate has also made it more difficult to harvest wild foods, which are increasingly less abundant.
How will you work to ensure that communities of this region will continue to be able to hunt the bowhead whale?
The candidates had to show they understand the importance of subsistence foods.
When you think about harvesting a whale, it is not just a marine mammal that gives itself for the meat.
Subsistence isn't an option, it's the only way you can stay alive.
The students here told us they had researched the candidates' positions online and couldn't find much about the Arctic.
Things like oil and having cruise ships come up around our area.
It excited me a lot. This is my first time going to an actual debate.
For the students, it's their future that's at stake.
Is the glass half full or half empty for the Arctic? The perseverance of the people that make up the Arctic, it is absolutely full.
I know that with the right investment in education and in new technology, and in particularly in renewable resources, the glass in the Arctic can be full once again.
It is essential to the long-term survival of your community that everybody be included.
I believe with all my heart that Alaska is on the forefront of a new era.
It's a vision here that Alaskans hope will come to pass, a vision they want their senators and representatives in Congress to share with the world. Only one candidate did not take part in the debate, Joe Miller on the Libertarian ticket. The forum was sponsored by the Inuit Arctic Business Alliance. Well, the fun isn't over, or for that matter, the misery for those of you with a bad case of election fatigue. But either way, KTVA will have full coverage on our news, and into election night, we'll kick off our main coverage at 9 on KTVA.com and on our Facebook page, then continue on to Nightcast at 10 on KTVA Channel 11. Well, make sure you get out and vote and help make history happen. Hope you enjoyed our program. We'll see you next week.